Greetings and welcome back to Lacrim Noir. Before we get started, please feel free to comment and share where you're tuned in from. I love seeing every message. If dark and eerie tales resonate with you, remember to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. A brief reminder, you'll see 3 advertisements during the opening 10 minutes. Once those are over, the full video will play without any further ads, letting you drift off into a calm sleep. Now, get comfortable, clear your thoughts, allow the world outside to slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. His breathing was the only thing Marcus allowed himself to hear. Inhale. His chest rose as sweet oxygen filled his lungs. Hold. 3 seconds, just like Dot had taught him. 3 slow seconds while his body took what it needed. Exhale. His chest fell again. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. That was all he had to focus on. Nothing else existed if he did not let it. Not the furniture scraping somewhere beyond the closet door. Not the dull thuds. Not the strange, searching sounds of hands moving over walls, desks, and broken glass. Not the odd bump that came every few seconds as if something heavy and impatient kept knocking against the office furniture. Just breathe. Dot, his therapist, would probably never have guessed that her breathing exercises might one day literally save his life. She had taught them to him for panic attacks, for long meetings, for the kind of work stress that made his palms sweat and his throat tighten. She had smiled kindly and told him to return to his breath whenever the world became too much. Well, the world had become too much, so Marcus breathed. Inhale, hold, exhale, rise and fall. He could stay like this for a while, curled up tight in the dark, knees pressed against his chest, arms wrapped around himself, like a baby in the womb. No light, no world, no horror, just blackness and breathing, and the faint feeling of floating in warm, safe water. Maybe he would stay in this closet for 9 months. Maybe when he finally opened the door, everything would be normal again. Maybe the world outside would have fixed itself. Maybe laws would matter again. Maybe nature would remember what it was supposed to do. Maybe society would rebuild itself quietly while he hid in here and breathed. But there was an outside. That thought came slowly, like something pushing up through mud. There was an outside beyond the closet door. Something was wrong out there, something dangerous. His mind had thrown a heavy blanket over everything outside this little dark space, softening the edges of memory, muffling the sounds, blurring the worst of it. He was in the closet. He was safe for now. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. He did not know how long he had been there, an hour or maybe a day. Time had collapsed into darkness and breath. He was hungry, but the hunger felt distant, dull enough to ignore. Thirst was worse. His lips had dried and cracked. His tongue felt thick and rough in his mouth. His throat scraped every time he swallowed. There was water outside. Outside, the words struck him harder this time. There was something outside, something dangerous, something that had driven him into the closet in the first place. Marcus tried to remember. The blanket over his mind resisted him, but thirst made him pull at it. He needed to know. He was in danger. He was in shock. He had to move, but he didn't know where. He could barely move out of the fetal position. Then he noticed wetness beneath him. His clothes had soaked it up. His side, his hip, the floor under him. For one awful moment, he thought he had wet himself. A dry, broken laugh almost escaped him. What a pathetic way to go. Starving to death in a puddle of his own piss inside an office closet. People would eventually come. They would see the madness outside, the absolute horror of what had happened, and then one of them would get a mop. They would open the closet and find him curled up like a discarded fetus, drenched in his own urine. Marcus groaned softly. The sounds outside became louder. Whatever was out there was growing frustrated, the seeker in a game of hide-and-seek losing patience. He heard slapping now, hands striking glass again and again, beating against it like a drum. Beyond that, a steady thrumming sound hovered in the background. A helicopter, maybe. The low, constant beat blended with the slaps against the window until the whole world seemed to pulse. Marcus shifted. Slowly, painfully, he unfolded himself from the tight curl he had held for so long. His joints screamed. His legs trembled. He moved from the fetal position onto his hands and knees, like something being born from the closet's dark wooden belly. He reached for the closet door. He pushed it open carefully, just a crack, enough to poke his head out. The light hurt his eyes, but not as much as he expected. He blinked until the room formed around him. The office was ruined. For a moment, his mind chose the smallest, dumbest detail to focus on. The reports were everywhere. Papers scattered across the floor in wild layers, like leaves across a forest path. Filing cabinets had been overturned, most of them pushed toward the main door as if someone had tried to barricade it. But the office doors opened outward, so the defense had been pointless. Brave, maybe, but useless. Computers had been thrown from desks. Pens and broken pieces of stationery littered the carpet. Shattered glass sparkled among them. So many pens, Marcus thought numbly. Why had they needed so many pens? They worked on tablets and laptops all day. They were practically iPad kids in business casual, glued to screens for 8 hours at a time. Them. His co-workers, the people he sat beside, the people he joked with safely near the coffee machine, the people he complained with about meetings, deadlines, and office temperatures. They were scattered around the room, too. Not like people anymore. Like dolls. Lifeless, twisted dolls with glassy eyes. Marcus was glad his stomach was empty because if there had been anything in it, it would have come up at once. They looked as if wild animals had attacked them. No, worse than animals. Animals killed to eat or protect themselves or because fear drove them to it. This looked like violence done by something that had forgotten there was any reason to stop. A memory came to him, strange and unwanted. Years ago, during one of his late-night internet holes, he had watched a video he wished he had never seen. A man stood on a bridge over a river, holding a sickly dog by the scruff. The men around him laughed and spoke in a language Marcus did not understand. The man dangled the dog over the water, then dropped it. The river changed instantly. It had been calm before, peaceful even. But as soon as the dog hit the surface, the water boiled, it churned and thrashed like the idea of flesh touching it had personally offended the river. Piranhas. Hundreds of them. The dog managed to swim to shore. For a few seconds, Marcus had thought it might survive. It dragged itself onto the mud, shaking so hard it could barely stand. But every inch of its body had been bitten. Small fish still clung to it, taking final mouthfuls. The dog collapsed. The men stopped laughing. Then one of them kicked it back into the river. Marcus had closed the video then, but he had never forgotten it. His co-workers looked like what might have crawled out of that river the second time. Ravaged, opened, turned into meat. Hannah, the boss's secretary, lay spread across a desk. Her face was turned toward him. She had always been quiet, happy to do her job and avoid attention. In life, she had been small. In death, she had somehow become the center of the whole awful room. Her cheeks had been torn away. Her tongue was gone. What remained made her look like she was smiling in horrible joy, as if the devil himself had leaned down and kissed her mouth apart. Marcus's mind pulled the blanket down again. No words, no thoughts, just a desperate inner voice saying, shh, don't think, don't look, don't understand. If you understand, you will scream, and if you scream, you will end up right there with them. He slowly rose to his feet. His legs were weak. The air conditioning blew cold against his wet clothes, but his body felt hot and freezing at the same time. Sweat chilled on his skin. His shirt clung to his side. The thumping continued, steady as a metronome. He turned a corner of the office and saw a woman at the window. She stood with both hands pressed to the full-length glass, beating against it again and again. Her palms slapped the pane in a desperate rhythm. They were on the 49th floor. There was no one on the street who could possibly help her from there. The helicopter thrummed somewhere outside. For one strange second, the whole scene looked like the set of an action movie. Ruined office, broken glass, bodies, helicopter, woman at the window. Marcus bit back a giggle, then a sob. He did not recognize the woman. She was badly injured, though not as badly as the others. Her clothes were torn and soaked in blood and something thicker. She looked like she had waded through. His mind softened the thought before it finished. He let it. She was alive, that was all that mattered. Another living person in all this carnage. He took off his cardigan without really thinking and placed it on a nearby desk. His eyes never left her. It felt as if his vision belonged to someone else. As if he were a camera and some invisible director had decided where he should look. He walked toward her. Glass crunched under his shoes. If she heard it, she ignored him. She kept slapping the window, dogged in her attempt to signal someone, anyone. It was an SOS made of panic and skin. He was close now, almost close enough to touch her, but he stopped. What was he supposed to say? Are you okay? That would be insane. We need to get out? Obviously. What happened? He already knew enough. She was all rage and determination. He was empty, mute, dumb. A walking automaton waiting for orders. Then it happened. There was no slow motion, no dramatic moment, no long crack spreading across the glass while music swelled. That was how it happened in movies. Reality was faster. The next, she was gone. The glass gave way and she vanished out of the building. A wet, distant sound followed, splat, gone. Another prop in the background theater. Marcus stood there staring at the broken window. Why hadn't he screamed? He had just watched someone throw herself out of the 49th floor. He had heard her body hit something below. A person had become paste, or at least should have. Why hadn't anyone else screamed? The world has gone mad, a voice inside him said. And you're right there in the asylum. No, the world had not gone mad. That was impossible. Soon he would hear sirens. Police, fire trucks, ambulances. Someone would come. Marcus and his coworkers would be questioned, taken downstairs, maybe to the station, wrapped in blankets, given water. He looked behind him at the bodies. Probably not. He sighed. The sound frightened him more than anything else had. It was the first thing he had done that felt like himself. Cold air poured through the broken window. Marcus stepped closer and carefully looked over the edge. She had not reached the street. The building was old, built in the traditional skyscraper style with the lower floors wider than the upper ones. She had fallen maybe 10 or 15 stories before hitting one of the lower roofs or ledges. Not enough to turn her into paste, but enough to kill her, surely. Except she was moving. Down below, she writhed like a worm pulled from soil. Her arms and legs thrashed in uncoordinated jerks. Even broken, even collapsed, she looked more alive than before, more filled with fury, more like anger wearing meat. Marcus vomited. It shot out of him and fell through the open air, splattering somewhere around her below. He pulled himself back from the window, gagging, then vomited again. It emptied him completely. Every last bit of strength left his body. His ribs hurt from dry heaving. His throat burned. He was freezing and sweating at the same time. He felt like he could melt in the Arctic and freeze in the desert. He clutched his sides. His hands came away bloody. Marcus stared at them. The wetness on his clothes had not been urine. It was blood. Blood covered his side and hip, splashed across him as if someone had gone mad with a paint roller. Some of it was dry. Some of it was still wet. A terrible thought opened inside him. Had he done this? Had some demon entered him and used his body to destroy the office? Had he torn his co-workers apart, ripping flesh and bone like paper? Or was it something worse, something hidden inside him all along? A Jekyll and Hyde collapse after years of soul-grinding corporate life. A secret hunger finally rising up to hunt, dance, and celebrate madness. No, he wasn't a killer. He couldn't be. What kind of killer hid in a closet, shaking and breathing like a frightened child? His terror would have betrayed him long before he could hurt anyone. Then he noticed the darker patch near his hip. The fabric there bulged. The cotton strained upward as if something beneath it was trying to push through. A creeping smell of decay filled his nose. It was rotten, thick, and sour. With trembling fingers, Marcus lifted his shirt. A clot of blackened blood fell from underneath and hit the floor with a wet splat, like a water balloon bursting. It looked almost black, but there was a faint red tint in it. The smell of copper pennies rose from the mess. Underneath was the wound, jagged, deep, human-shaped, a bite. Marcus stopped breathing. The final curtain in his mind pulled back. The blanket was gone now. The part of his brain that had been protecting him seemed to whisper, "Well, you wanted to know. Don't be upset when you get your answer." The memories came together. A man running into the office. No, maybe one of his own co-workers. Screaming, biting, blood. People falling, then standing again. People being bitten, dying, and then getting back up with rage in their hearts and hunger on their lips. Curiosity killed the cat. A thought whispered from somewhere inside him. "Oh God," Marcus breathed. The bite throbbed. He had seen what happened to the others. He had seen the dead rise. He had hidden in the closet before he could become one of them, or perhaps after the change had already started. But satisfaction brought it back. His hands shook as he pressed them against the wound. The office seemed to tilt around him. The bodies on the floor no longer looked still. Some fingers twitched. Somewhere near the overturned cabinets, something dragged itself through the papers. Down below, the woman on the ledge began slamming her broken limbs against the building, trying to climb. The helicopter continued to thrum outside. Or maybe that was his heartbeat. Marcus backed away from the window. The thirst in his throat had changed. It no longer felt like dryness, it felt like need. A deep animal ache that ran from his tongue down into his stomach. He looked at Hannah on the desk, then quickly looked away. No, 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 no. He staggered toward the closet, but his legs would not obey properly. His knees bent wrong, his fingers curled, his jaw ached, his teeth felt too large in his mouth. He tried to breathe like Dot had taught him. Inhale, hold, exhale, rise and fall, rise and fall. But the rhythm was wrong now. His chest barely moved. His body no longer seemed interested in oxygen. From somewhere in the office came a low groan. Another answered. Marcus turned his head slowly. His co-workers were beginning to move. Not all of them, but enough. Their glassy eyes opened. Their ruined bodies shifted in the paper and glass. Broken hands scraped against tile. One mouth, torn almost beyond recognition, opened and closed, as if tasting the air. Marcus wanted to scream. Instead, a sound crawled up from his throat. Wet, hungry, almost eager. He clamped both hands over his mouth, but the sound pushed between his fingers anyway. Outside, the helicopter passed closer. Light swept across the office through the broken window, washing over the bodies, the blood, the scattered reports, the ruined desks. For a second, Marcus saw everything clearly. The world had not set itself on fire. It had been bitten. And now it was getting back up. He stumbled into the closet and pulled the door shut behind him. Darkness wrapped around him again. He curled into himself, pressing his hands against the bite, rocking slightly on the wet floor. Breathe, he told himself. Just breathe. But he could smell them outside now. Not the blood, not the decay. The living, somewhere beyond the office. Somewhere down the hall. Maybe stairwells, maybe other floors. Hearts beating, bodies warm, people crying into phones, hiding under desks, praying in bathroom stalls. He could hear them through the walls. He could hear everything. Marcus closed his eyes. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. But his chest did not rise. And it did not fall. Not anymore. Story 2. I'm hoping someone can help me. I know this is going to sound strange, and I'm having a hard time putting it into words in a way that makes sense, but I need someone to understand what happened. More than that, I need someone to call me as soon as possible. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, and I don't know what is waiting outside my house. All I know is that this started about a week ago, just after I finished another late shift at work. That night, I was exhausted. The kind of tired where your eyes burn, your body feels heavy, and every small problem feels like a personal attack. I had been looking forward to getting home, taking off my shoes, eating whatever was easiest to heat up, and falling into bed without thinking about anything until my alarm dragged me back into the same miserable routine the next morning. But of course, that didn't happen. The road I normally took home was closed for road work. Big orange signs, flashing lights, cones everywhere. No warning that I had noticed before. No easy way around it. I sat there for a minute with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the blocked road in front of me. Then I leaned forward and rested my forehead against the wheel, letting out the kind of tired, angry breath that only comes after a long day you were already barely surviving. That closed road meant I had to take the longer country route home. It meant more driving, more darkness, and at least 45 minutes of sleep that I was actively losing. It sounds small, I know, but when your whole life feels like it is held together with cheap tape and caffeine, 45 minutes can feel like everything. So I turned the car around and headed for the back roads. As the street lights disappeared behind me in the rearview mirror, the road became darker and quieter. Houses became fewer and farther apart. The glow of town faded until there was nothing but my headlights cutting through the night and the black shape of trees on both sides of the road. I cursed under my breath the whole way, thinking about how every tiny inconvenience in my life seemed to have lined up perfectly that day. My boss had been the biggest one. Just as I was walking out the door at work, already half free in my mind, he saw me and called my name. He had that fake friendly smile on his face, the one he used when he was about to ask for something he had no intention of doing himself. He said, "Could you stay a little longer? We need to finish our presentation for the board." It meant the world to me. The worst part was that he said it while putting on his coat. He was leaving. He was asking me to stay late so he could go home. Then he patted me on the back like we were buddies and added, "Thanks, bud. You're the best." I wanted to say no. I wanted to ask him why it always had to be me. I wanted to remind him that this was his presentation too, or at least it was supposed to be. But instead, I smiled like an idiot and said it was fine. I stayed late. I finished the work. I watched the clock crawl forward while the office emptied around me. And by the time I finally got to my car, I felt hollowed out. I wish I could say that kind of thing was unusual, but it wasn't anymore. It had started becoming normal. Every week, there was some new favor, some extra task, some emergency that somehow became my problem. I remember thinking about quitting as I drove through those dark country roads. I imagined walking into the office, putting my resignation on his desk, and never hearing his voice again. But then I thought about the job search, the interviews, the awkward questions, the fake smiles, the waiting, the rejection emails, and the possibility of ending up somewhere just as bad. So I shut the idea down like I always did. About 20 minutes into the detour, the clock on my dashboard hit midnight. The radio had been playing loudly because I was trying to keep myself awake. Some song I barely liked was blasting through the speakers, filling the car just enough to keep the silence out. Then, without warning, the sound began to crackle. The music twisted into static. It faded in and out like something was chewing through the signal. I reached for the dial, annoyed, but before I could fix it, the music was gone completely. All that remained was static. Then a voice broke through. "Good evening to all you lovely listeners, and welcome back to Midnight Radio. It's me, the host, back again to bring all the joy of a late-night show." "What the hell?" I muttered. At first, I thought I had picked up some independent station out in the country. Maybe one of those strange local broadcasts that only came through when you were far away from everything else. I tried switching back to my own music. I pressed buttons, changed inputs, turned the radio off and on again. But the station stayed. The static would crackle for a second, then that cheerful voice came right back as if it had been waiting for me. I was too tired to fight with it for long. The road was narrow, the trees were close, and I didn't want to crash into a ditch because I was busy arguing with my radio, so I left it on. At first, it was strange. Then, somehow, it became enjoyable. The host had a bright, old-fashioned kind of voice, like someone from a late-night show that had been running for decades. He talked too smoothly, too happily, but there was something comforting about it when you were alone on a dark road. He introduced bands I had never heard of, with names that sounded fake or maybe just extremely indie. Tall Man with the Backbone, $6 Sunglasses, Jim Jones' Retirement Plan. I remember laughing at some of them because they sounded like bands people pretended to like at parties. But the music was good, really good, better than it should have been. The kind of music that made the road feel less empty and my thoughts less sharp. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had stopped being annoyed. I just sat there with the engine idling, listening. It was almost 1 in the morning when the host came back on after a song by Tall Man with the Backbone called Don't Go Looking for My Face. The song had been strange, but catchy in a way that got under my skin. When it ended, the host said, "Well, listeners, we've come to the end. We'll be back tomorrow night with a few new additions to our little radio show, so be sure to tune in. I hope you have a good rest of your night, because sometimes it might just be your last. Good night, folks." That last sentence made me pause. Then the broadcast ended, and the radio returned to static. I sat there in my driveway for a few more seconds, feeling oddly calm despite the creepy sign-off. Maybe I was just too tired to care. Maybe the music had relaxed me. Either way, I went inside, locked the door, set my alarm for work, and collapsed into bed. The next morning, I woke up late. Not just a little late either. I had slept through my alarm or maybe turned it off without remembering. By the time I made it to work, I was 15 minutes behind schedule. 15 minutes, that was all. Of course, my boss made a show of it. The moment I walked through the door, he looked up with a big grin on his face and said, "Well, look who decided to show up. Maybe lay off the drinking on a work night, eh, champ?" I wanted to hit him. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. I had stayed late doing his work, lost sleep because of it, and then got treated like a lazy idiot for being 15 minutes late. He said it loudly enough for other people to hear too, like he was doing a stand-up routine and I was the punchline. I stood there and breathed in slowly. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, then forced myself to relax. I pushed all the awful things I wanted to say back down where they usually lived. Then I smiled. "You're right," I said with a fake laugh. "Anyway, we've got that big presentation coming up. Let's get in there." I hated myself for saying it. I still do. We walked into the meeting room, where the heads of the other departments were already gathered. They were there to hear our new finance plan, something that was supposed to help turn the company around. I'm not going to explain the details because I don't want anyone figuring out where I work, and honestly, the details were painfully boring. The important part is this. I did all the work. The spreadsheets, the research, the charts, the projections, the slides, the talking points. All of it. My boss barely touched it, so when he stood at the front of that room and introduced the presentation like it was his masterpiece, something inside me cracked. He smiled at everyone and spoke in that confident voice of his, the one he used when he wanted people to think he was brilliant. He started explaining the work like he had built it from the ground up. He didn't mention me, he didn't even look at me. He just stood there and took ownership of weeks of my effort, as easily as if he were stealing a pen from my desk. I don't remember deciding to stand up. 1 second I was sitting there, feeling the anger build behind my eyes, and the next I was on my feet. My voice was loud, too loud. I told him I had done the work. I told everyone in that room that he had barely contributed. I said he spent more time sneaking greasy food into his office than helping with anything. And yes, I mentioned that we could all hear him eating in there, making wet, awful noises over whatever slop was in the bag. The room went silent. That was when I realized how bad it looked. I was standing in front of the department heads, red-faced and shaking, while my boss stared at me like I had grown another head. These people didn't see a man finally standing up for himself. They saw someone losing control in a professional meeting. And my boss knew it. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just walked over, put his sweaty hand on my shoulder, and said softly, "Why don't you go home for the day?" I wanted to keep shouting. I wanted to tell everyone exactly what he was. But I knew I had already lost. So I walked out slowly, listening to him apologize to the room for my outburst and tell everyone they should move on with his presentation. His presentation, I ground my teeth the entire drive home. When I got inside, I dropped onto the couch like my bones had been removed. I stared at the ceiling and decided right then that I was quitting the next morning. I didn't care about interviews or rejection emails or starting over. I couldn't keep doing this. Until then, I was going to drown in my own feelings. I grabbed the remote and put on a movie I had seen at least 100 times. I wasn't really watching it. I just needed noise. I lay there staring at the screen, imagining what life would be like if I never had to work again, if I never had to see my boss again, if I never had to smile while someone walked all over me. A few hours later, my phone started pinging. It was the work group chat. At first, I ignored it. Then the notifications kept coming, ping after ping after ping, until I thought the phone was going to shake itself off the table. Finally, I picked it up. The entire office had gone out after work. They were at a bar, laughing, drinking, taking pictures, celebrating. The presentation had gone amazingly well. My boss had apparently done a stellar job, and everyone was thrilled. They had organized an impromptu party to celebrate the success. There were pictures of him smiling with a drink in his hand, surrounded by people praising him for work I had done. I looked up from my phone and saw the bottle of Jack Daniels on the counter. It had been waiting for me since I got home. Well, I said to the empty room, I might as well play the part of the office drunk. An hour and a half a bottle later, I was gone, completely drunk. If someone had walked past my house and heard the noise coming from inside, they might have thought there was a party happening. There wasn't. It was just me, angry and alone, playing bad music from the early 2000s too loudly and talking to myself like I was the host of my own sad little show. Then the speakers crackled. The song I was playing popped, warped, and dissolved into static. A sharp screech filled the room, making me jump. Then the cheerful voice returned. Good evening, listeners. Welcome back to Midnight Radio. Tonight we've got a few more new bands lined up for the next hour. There will also be a little treat for some of our newer listeners at the end of the hour, so stay with us while we get settled into the sound of Motorbike Cascade by the Shredders. The voice was coming through my speakers, but my phone still showed my playlist connected. I checked the app. Nothing had changed. The song I had been playing was still there on the screen, paused or stuck or pretending everything was normal. I stood there, drunk and confused, scratching my head. I had no idea how a radio station had started playing through my speakers. But like I said, I was drunk. I was tired, I was angry. I didn't have the energy to troubleshoot the impossible. So I sat back down and listened. The music that followed was even better than the night before. I told myself these were probably just underground bands I had never heard of. Maybe the station had some weird way of hijacking signals. Maybe I was too drunk to understand what was happening. All of those explanations seemed good enough at the time. More bands came and went. Each one had a stranger name than the last. But every song pulled me deeper into the chair. It felt like the music was wrapping around my thoughts, softening the edges of my anger, making the room feel warmer than it was. Then, in the last 5 minutes of the show, everything stopped. No music, no static, no host. Just silence. It lasted around 30 seconds, which does not sound long until you are sitting alone in your house at midnight, drunk, with every speaker in the room suddenly dead. I got up to check whether they had finally given out. As I reached toward one of them, the host's voice exploded back in, louder and more cheerful than before. Well, folks, we're coming up to that special surprise we've been cooking up. Tonight, we will be calling one listener to play What's That Song? A fake crowd cheered in the background. It sounded like canned applause from an old game show. We here at Midnight Radio wanted to thank our new listeners for tuning in. You're making dreams of ours come true. So let's call a lucky listener now. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. There was no number, no contact name, nothing. Just a big green button glowing on the screen. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown the phone across the room. Instead, without much thought and with far too much alcohol in my system, I pressed the button and lifted the phone to my ear. Yell low, I slurred. The host's voice burst through the phone with the same bright energy. Hello there. Congratulations on being called in for our one-question quiz. How are you feeling today? I don't know how many people were listening to that broadcast, or if anyone was listening at all. I also don't think it would have stopped me if I had known. I started talking. I told him about my day, my boss, the presentation, the drinking, all of it. I complained like he was an old friend sitting across from me at a bar. I called my boss names I probably shouldn't repeat. I said things I would never have said sober. When I finally ran out of steam, the host made a sympathetic sound. Well, I'm sorry to hear you've hit such a low point, he said. But tonight you can turn all that around by answering one simple question. What's that song? The applause returned, louder this time. The host explained the rules. Now you only get one chance, so make it count. Don't worry, though, because you do have a support line, so feel free to call on them if you need it. Be warned, though, you will not qualify for the prize if you do. That sounded stupid to me. Why would I use them then? I asked. He ignored me completely. Are you ready? Because here it comes. The song started playing. I recognized it right away. It was from the night before, the one that had played just before the show ended. The name was there in my mind, but the alcohol made it slippery. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. Come on, I muttered. You know this. The guitar, the voice, the strange chorus. Then it hit me. Don't go looking for my face, I shouted. The fake audience erupted into cheers. Well done, listener, the host said. You nailed it. Glad to know you've been paying attention. Now, his voice dropped lower, almost intimate. Have you ever wanted something more than anything? I nodded, even though I was alone. Yeah. Well, now you can get it, listener. All you have to do is make a wish. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. Are you serious? As a heart attack, sir, he said, cheerful again. Now what do you want more than anything? I paced around my living room, swaying a little. If this was some fake prize, some birthday candle nonsense, I figured I might as well go big. I was drunk, angry, humiliated, and full of every ugly feeling I had swallowed for months. You know what, host? I said. All I want most in the world right now is for that fat prick of a boss of mine to take a short walk off the top floor of our office. The host laughed loudly. Not a polite laugh. A real laugh. Like he had just heard something wonderful. You know, I knew I liked you, listener. Now, is that your wish? If it is, just say your name, your wish, and hang up. It's that simple. I had slid down onto the floor, the phone pressed to my ear, the room spinning slowly around me. My name is Patrick, I said. My wish is for my boss to dive off a building. Then I hung up. The last thing I remember before passing out was the host's voice coming from the speakers again. Well, that sure was an exciting quiz. We'll be back again tomorrow night. So, in the meantime, I hope you have a good rest of your night, because sometimes it might just be your last. Good night, folks. The next morning, I woke up on the floor in a puddle of my own drool. My head was pounding. My mouth tasted like old pennies and regret. The sounds of morning crept in slowly. Birds outside, cars passing by, and then, cutting through all of it, the 3 alarms I had missed. I was at least an hour late for work. Crap, I groaned. At that point, I figured it didn't matter. If I wasn't going to quit, they were probably going to fire me anyway. I dragged myself upright, stumbled to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. I got dressed badly, still half hungover, and left the house with one goal in mind: go to work, quit my dead-end job, and move on to another dead-end job somewhere else. As I drove in, I tried to think of the perfect last thing to say. Something sharp, something that would let me walk out with my dignity, even though I probably had very little left. Then I pulled into the parking lot and saw the ambulance. Police were standing near the front entrance, keeping people back. A crowd had gathered outside the building. Some people were crying, others were whispering. A few were trying to see past the officers, their faces pale and hungry with shock. My heart dropped. I got out of the car and walked toward the crowd. One of my coworkers, someone I actually liked, grabbed my arm before I got too close. "Where were you this morning?" they asked. "Did you see what happened?" I stared past them toward the building. "What happened?" They swallowed and glanced back. "It's a good thing you weren't here. We don't know what happened." Their voice faded. Someone told me not to. A police officer shouted for me to stay back. But I had to know. Something inside me already knew, and that made it worse. For a brief moment, through the shifting bodies and uniforms, I saw him, or what was left of him. Later, people told me the details. They said that if anyone working on the first floor or above had been looking out the window at the right time, they would have seen a man in his early 40s, falling past the glass. Just a blur, there for a split second, moving too fast to understand. Then came the sound, bones hitting pavement. People rushed outside screaming. They found my boss lying face first near the entrance. His legs were twisted at an awful angle. One arm was broken so badly that the bones had pierced the skin, sticking out like needles through fabric. Blood spread beneath him in a widening pool. But he wasn't dead right away. That was the part that stayed with everyone. The people who tried to help said he lifted his blood-covered head from the pavement. His eyes were rolled upward like he was in a trance, like he wasn't fully inside his own body anymore. Then, with the last of his strength, he began dragging himself back toward the building. He used his left arm, the only one that still moved at all, though the fingers on that hand were broken and bent. He pulled himself toward the entrance, leaving a thick trail of blood behind him. A red smear stretched from where he landed to the doors. People screamed for him to stop moving. Someone vomited. Someone else tried to hold him still, but he kept dragging himself forward as if something was calling him back inside. He died somewhere between the first and second floors while the paramedics were trying to carry him back down to the ambulance. The smell outside the building was sickening. Blood, sweat, pavement, and something else I don't have words for. It hung in the air and clung to everyone there. I knew some people would carry it on their clothes for the rest of the day. Others would carry it in their memory for the rest of their lives. I didn't know what else to do, so I got in my car and drove home. I took the long way. That evening, I sat in front of the television, numb. The story was already on the local news. They said it was a tragedy. They said my boss had been seen leaving his office calmly before taking his own life. People said he had greeted them on the way out like he was simply leaving early for the day, not walking toward the top of a 4-story building. The interviews were the worst part. People talked about what a nice guy he was. They said he cared about the office. They said he looked out for people during difficult times. They said they never would have expected it. I turned the TV off. I couldn't listen anymore. My head was in my hands. I kept hearing my own voice from the night before. "My name is Patrick. My wish is for my boss to dive off a building." I had done this. I didn't understand how, but I knew it. A man was dead because of me. I hated him. I really did. But I didn't want him to die. I didn't want that. I had been drunk and angry. I had thought it was a joke. I looked at the clock. 3 hours until midnight. I had to fix it. I needed to take the quiz again. I needed another wish. I would wish for him to be alive. I would undo everything. I sat in the dark, waiting. I didn't play music. I didn't turn on the TV. I just waited, staring at the black screen, counting the minutes. When midnight finally came, everything in my house that could make sound came alive at once. The television speakers, my phone, my laptop, the Bluetooth speaker, even an old alarm clock radio in the kitchen that I hadn't used in years. Good evening, listeners. Welcome back to Midnight Radio. Tonight, since our last broadcast was so successful, we've decided to bring back the quiz for another night. If this keeps up, we might have it as a nightly part of our show. Now, how does that sound? The canned applause started up again. The first 2 times I had heard Midnight Radio, it had felt good. The songs had pulled me in. There was something about them that made me want to keep listening. Like each one had a hook buried somewhere deeper than sound. But that night, I felt only dread. It sat heavy in my stomach, like I had swallowed stones. The host played songs for 45 minutes, 45 slow, awful minutes. I sat there with my hands clenched, waiting for the quiz. Finally, his voice returned, smoother and colder than before. Well, everyone, we've had a lot of fun these past few days and even granted a wish. Maybe, like me, you are all curious how our winner from last night is getting on. So why don't we give him a call, since I know he's listening anyway. Isn't that right, Patrick? I froze. He knew my name. Of course he did. I had told him, but this was different. He knew I was there. He knew I was listening. He knew I was waiting. For the first time, I understood that I was not dealing with a radio station. Not really. I felt like something huge was circling me in dark water, letting me breathe for a little longer before it opened its mouth. Patrick, the host said again. It was not a question. What are you? I said into the empty room. My phone rang. I picked it up slowly and held it to my ear. Did you get what you wished for, Patrick? The host asked. I could hear the smile in his voice. I want to take it back, I said. My voice shook even though I tried to sound calm. Can I do that? He laughed softly. Well, of course you can. You just have to play the game again. May I ask why? You seemed awfully set on this wish just last night. I stumbled over my words, trying to explain. I told him I had not known it was real. I told him I hated my boss, but he didn't deserve to die. I told him I had been drunk and angry and stupid. Well, Patrick, the host said, I had hoped you were smarter than that. But I can't fault you for trying to set things right. In any case, are you ready to play What's That Song? I said yes. The song started. It played longer than the first one had the night before. At the time, I thought he was giving me a chance. I thought he was letting me hear enough of it to remember the title. Looking back, I think he was mocking me. I think he already knew I would not get it. I listened hard. The melody sounded familiar but wrong. The lyrics slipped by too quickly. My mind raced through every song I had heard on the station, every weird band name, every title. I guessed I was wrong. Ooh, sorry there, Patrick, the host said. That's not what we were looking for. It was, in fact, Big Man, Bigger Falls. And with that, no, I said. No, please. Give me another chance. He kept talking over me. We've come to the end of our show tonight, listeners. Now, since Patrick here wasn't up to the challenge, sadly, he won't be back on again. Panic took over. Please, I begged. I'm begging you, undo it. I'll do anything. The host stopped. For a moment, all I heard was static breathing through the line. Then he said, well, that's wonderful, because we've got just the thing for someone like you, Patrick. How would you like to join our support line to help other callers get their wish? I didn't think. I didn't ask what it meant. I only heard the word help, and I wanted any chance to make things right. "Yes," I said. "What do I need to do?" The line went dead. "Hello?" I whispered. Behind me from the kitchen counter, an old rotary phone began to ring. Ring, ring. I turned slowly. I did not own a rotary phone. I had never owned one. But there it was, sitting on the counter like it had always belonged there. Black, heavy, old-fashioned, with a curled cord and a round dial. Ring, ring. I walked over and picked it up. The host's voice came through immediately. "Hey there, Patrick. Glad you've joined our support system. Happy to have you on the team." I cut straight to the only thing that mattered. What do I need to do to undo my wish? There was a small laugh in his voice. "Slow your roll. You'll get there. But first, you need to understand the rules." "What rules?" I snapped. "Surely it can't be that difficult." "No, of course not," he said brightly. "All you have to do is stay inside, pick up when the phone rings, and listen to the show for a chance at winning. See? Simple." I frowned. "Why can't I go outside? Why don't you take a look behind your curtains?" I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to. But I put the phone down slowly and walked to the living room window. My hand shook as I pulled the curtains apart. Nothing. Not darkness like night. Not the normal kind of dark where you can still see streetlights, houses, trees, or the faint orange glow of town in the distance. This was complete blackness. It pressed against the glass like a wall. My street was gone. The houses across from mine were gone. The porch light should have shone at least a few feet ahead, but it showed nothing. The window reflected only my own pale face in the room behind me. My breathing became shallow. The host's voice continued from the kitchen. "Now you're going to stay here for a while and wait for a new caller to ask for your help. If they ask for your help and you win, you get to take their wish." "And then you'll let me out?" I asked. But he had already returned to his show. "Sorry about that, everyone. I was just getting our new support caller situated. Now that he's all settled, we can end this properly. So until then, I hope you have a good rest of your night, because sometimes it might just be your last. Good night, folks." That was 1 week ago. Since then, the radio has not stopped. During the day, it plays music from bands I have never heard of. At night, the host comes on and does his show. Every midnight, a new contestant gets called. Every night, I sit beside the rotary phone and pray they ask for the support line. But why would they? The host tells them they lose the prize if they use it. He makes it sound like asking for help is the wrong choice, so they don't ask. They guess on their own. Some win, some lose. I don't know what happens to the ones who lose. I only know I'm still here. The food is running low. I've been eating whatever I had in the cabinets: cereal, crackers, soup, peanut butter from the jar. I tried the taps, and for now the water still works, though sometimes it comes out colder than it should. I sleep in short bursts because the phone might ring at any time. I'm afraid that if I miss it, I'll lose my only chance. The worst part is the outside. It waits behind every window. Sometimes I think I hear people in it. Footsteps on the porch. Fingers dragging along the siding. Whispering voices that sound almost familiar. Once I heard my boss outside the front door. He was crying and dragging something heavy behind him. He said my name. I didn't open the door. I'm trying not to be tempted to find a way out through the darkness, but every day it gets harder. The house feels smaller, the air feels stale, the radio keeps playing, the host keeps laughing, and every night I wait for someone to need help badly enough to ask for it. That's why I'm reaching out here. I don't know how this message is getting out. I don't know if anyone will read it in time. But if you hear Midnight Radio and if you get called to play the quiz, please ask for the support line. Ask for me. Ask for Patrick. Please. I need one more chance to make this right. Have you heard the Midnight Radio Show? Story 3. I don't usually talk about what happened that night because even now, after all this time, I still don't understand it. I have tried to explain it to myself in different ways. I have told myself I was tired. I have told myself the storm made everything sound strange. I have told myself the power outage, the darkness, and the rain all worked together to make my mind imagine things that were not there. I have even told myself that maybe some person really had come to my door that night and I simply misunderstood the whole situation. But none of those explanations fit. Not all the way. This happened last year on one of the worst rainy nights I can remember. The rain had started in the afternoon and never really stopped. By evening, it had become heavy enough that the street outside looked like a shallow river. Water ran along the edges of the road, collecting near the drains. The wind pushed the rain sideways against the windows, and every now and then a stronger gust would make the whole house creak. I lived alone then in a small house at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't a bad place, but it always felt a little too silent at night. The houses on my street were spaced far enough apart that you couldn't hear much from your neighbors unless someone was mowing, arguing outside, or letting a dog bark too long. That night, nobody was outside. No cars passed, no voices came from other houses. There was only the rain. It hit the roof for hours with a constant heavy sound. It ran down the windows in thick streams. It drummed against the gutters and splashed against the front step. Around midnight, the power went out. That wasn't unusual where I lived. Strong storms often knocked the power out, especially when the wind got bad. Still, the sudden darkness made my stomach tighten. One moment, the lamp beside my bed was glowing. The next, the whole room vanished. I lay still for a second, listening. The refrigerator had gone silent. The little hum from the hallway light was gone. Everything in the house seemed to pause, as if the darkness had swallowed more than just electricity. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Then I got up, found a candle in the kitchen drawer, and lit it with a lighter I kept near the stove. The small flame gave off just enough light to make the room feel less empty, but it also threw shadows against the walls that moved every time the flame flickered. I carried the candle back to my bedroom and placed it on the table near my bed. I thought about reading, but the sound of the rain made me drowsy. I pulled the blanket over myself and tried to sleep. I don't know how long I lay there. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. The rain made time feel strange. It was so steady that after a while it became less like weather and more like something inside the house, with me breathing against every wall and window. Then I heard a knock. At first, I didn't move. It was soft, or at least it sounded soft under the rain. A dull tap against the front door. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. My first thought was that it had to be the wind. A branch, maybe, or something loose on the porch knocking against the door. The storm was strong enough to throw things around. No one should have been outside in weather like that. I closed my eyes again. Then it happened a second time. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock. They were clear. Too clear to be the wind. I sat up in bed. The candle flame bent slightly, though the window was shut. Shadows moved across the room. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. Only rain. I grabbed my phone from the table and checked it. No messages. No missed calls. No one had told me they were coming over. I didn't have friends who randomly dropped by after midnight, especially not in a storm. My family didn't live close enough for it to be them. I stayed in bed for a while, telling myself not to be stupid. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe someone's car had broken down. Maybe someone needed help. That thought made me feel guilty for staying still. Then I heard a voice. It was faint, almost lost under the rain. A woman's voice. Please open the door. The voice sounded like it was coming from the porch, muffled by the storm. It was soft and weak, like whoever was outside had been standing in the rain for too long. For a second, I really did think someone needed help. I pushed the blanket aside and stood up. The floor was cold under my feet. I picked up the candle and slowly walked out of the bedroom. The rest of the house was dark and the candlelight barely reached the walls. Every step made the floor creak louder than usual. The voice came again. Please open the door. I stopped in the hallway. Something about it was wrong. Not the words. The words were normal. If anything, they were exactly what a frightened person might say. But the voice did not sound natural. It sounded like someone pretending to be afraid, like someone had heard a human being ask for help before and was trying to copy the tone, but did not fully understand it. It stretched certain sounds too long. It paused in the wrong places. It had no real breath behind it. I moved closer to the front door, but did not unlock it. The rain hammered against the porch roof. The whole front of the house was dark except for the weak gray light from outside. I pulled the curtain beside the door aside just enough to look through the narrow gap. Someone was standing on the porch. I could only make out a dark shape because of the rain. But it was definitely a person. They stood facing the door, completely still. Rain poured over them. Their clothes clung to their body. Their head was slightly lowered, but somehow I knew they were facing me. I could not see their face. I stood there with the curtain between my fingers, barely breathing. Then the knocking started again. This time it was louder, faster. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. The door shook slightly with each hit. "Open the door," the voice said. It was not faint anymore. It sounded closer. Too close. Not like it was coming from the porch. Like it was right beside my ear. I stepped back so quickly I almost dropped the candle. Hot wax spilled onto my hand, and the sting snapped me out of the frozen panic that had settled over me. Something in my head spoke very clearly. "Do not open the door." The knocking stopped. The voice stopped for one impossible second. Even the rain stopped. The silence was sudden and complete. It was so deep that I could hear my own heartbeat. The house seemed to hold its breath with me. Then the rain returned all at once, crashing down harder than before. I stood in the hallway for a long time. I did not move toward the door again. I did not go back to bed. I just stood there with the candle shaking in my hand, staring at the dark rectangle of the front door. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me. I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and kept the candle burning on the coffee table. I told myself I would wait there until the power came back or until morning. But at some point, without meaning to, I fell asleep. When I woke up, pale daylight was coming through the curtains. The rain had stopped. The power was back. For a few seconds, I just sat there, stiff and confused, trying to remember why I had slept on the couch. Then everything came back at once. The knocking, the voice, the shape outside. I got up slowly. The house looked normal in the morning. That made the night before feel less real. The lights worked. The refrigerator hummed. Water dripped from the roof outside. Birds made small sounds from the trees. The world had returned to itself. I walked to the front door. My hand hovered over the lock for a moment. Then I opened it. The porch was empty. No one was there. No person. No note. No broken branch. Nothing leaning against the door. I almost laughed from relief. Then I looked down. There were muddy footprints on the porch. Bare footprints. They were dark and wet, pressed clearly into the thin layer of mud that had blown onto the step during the storm. But they were not leading toward the house. They were leading away from it. The strange part was where they started, right at my doorstep. Not from the yard to the door, from the door outward, as if someone had stepped out of my house and walked away into the rain. I stared at them until my eyes hurt. Then I shut the door and locked it. For the rest of the day, I tried to act normal. I cleaned, I made coffee, I checked the weather. I told myself the footprints probably had some explanation. Maybe someone had walked up before the mud washed away. Maybe the rain had changed how they looked. Maybe I was remembering the direction wrong. By evening, I had almost convinced myself. Then the weather turned bad again. The clouds rolled in before sunset, dark and low. By nightfall, rain was falling hard enough to blur the streetlights. The wind pressed against the windows. Branches scraped the side of the house. I watched the storm build with a sick feeling in my stomach. I kept every light on. I checked the front door twice. Then, just after midnight, the power went out again. The house sank into darkness. I did not light a candle this time. I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand, the screen glowing in my lap. My room felt too open, too exposed, even with the door closed. I told myself that last night had been a coincidence. Storms happen, power outages happen, strange knocks happen. Then came the 3 knocks. Knock, knock. I stopped breathing. They came from the front door. Slow, clear, patient. I stayed completely still. The knocks came again. Knock, knock. Then the voice, "Please open the door." I covered my mouth with my hand. The voice was the same, but this time there was less effort in it. It did not sound weak now. It sounded calm, certain. Like it knew I was inside. Like it had learned from the first night that pretending too hard was not necessary. Open the door. I did not move. The knocking continued. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast. Sometimes so hard I thought the door frame might crack. I sat in bed, shaking, staring into the dark hallway beyond my bedroom. Then everything stopped. Not just the knocking. The rain stopped, the wind stopped, the whole world outside went silent. I have never heard silence like that. It felt unnatural, heavy, like the air had turned solid. In that silence, I heard footsteps inside the house. Soft footsteps coming from the hallway. My mind refused to understand it at first. I told myself it was the house settling. I told myself anything except the truth. Then the steps came closer. Slow. Careful, bare feet on the floor, I sat frozen in my bed, unable to breathe properly. My phone screen went dark in my hand, and I was too terrified to tap it awake. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the handle began to turn. Slowly, the small metal sound of it moving was worse than a scream. I closed my eyes. I don't know why. Maybe because I thought if I didn't see it, it couldn't happen. Maybe because some childish part of me believed pretending to be asleep would save me. I lay down stiffly and kept my eyes shut, trying not to move. The bedroom door opened. I felt it. I heard the soft shift of air. Something entered the room. It did not walk to me right away. It stood there, watching. I could feel its presence near the foot of the bed, heavy and cold. My skin prickled under the blanket. Tears slipped from the corners of my closed eyes into my hair. Then it moved closer. The floor creaked once beside my bed. I wanted to scream, but my throat would not work. The voice came again, not from the hallway, not from the door. Right beside me. "You should have opened the door when I asked." I opened my eyes. The room was empty. For a second, I thought I had dreamed it. The bedroom door was closed. My phone was still in my hand. Rain had started again outside, soft and normal. Then I saw the hallway. The front door was wide open. Cold, wet air moved through the house. I got up slowly, my legs barely holding me. The muddy footprints began at the open doorway. This time they came inside. Bare footprints crossed the living room. They moved down the hallway. They stopped at my bedroom door. Then they continued into my room. They ended right beside my bed, exactly where I had felt something standing. I left that house the next day. I did not pack properly. I threw clothes into bags, grabbed my important documents, and drove away before sunset. I never slept there again. I had someone else collect the rest of my things later. I sold what I could and abandoned what I couldn't. People told me I overreacted. They said someone had broken in. They said I should have called the police. They said I let fear control me. Maybe they are right about that last part. Fear did control me. It still does. I moved to a different place, a higher apartment, a building with security doors, bright hallways, and neighbors close enough to hear me if I screamed. For a while, that helped. There were no muddy footprints, no open front door, no strange woman in the rain. But sometimes, when it storms at night and the lights flicker, I hear it again. 3 slow knocks. Not on my front door, not on any door that should be there. Sometimes from the closet, sometimes from the bathroom mirror. Knock, knock, Then that voice, soft and almost human, says the same thing from somewhere just out of sight. Please open the door. Story 4. I used to count the cracks in the hallway tiles so I would not have to look up. It became a habit so strong that I did not even think about it anymore. Every morning when I walked through school, my eyes dropped to the floor before I reached the first row of lockers. The tiles were pale gray with thin dark lines between them, and some of those lines had split over the years. There were cracks shaped like lightning, cracks shaped like veins, cracks that branched out and met other cracks like tiny maps of broken places. I knew them all. I knew the long one outside the science room that looked like a crooked smile. I knew the chipped tile near the water fountain where people always gathered before the bell. I knew the little dark spot near the office that never came clean no matter how often the janitor mopped. I counted them because looking down was safer. Looking up meant seeing them. Their faces, their smirks, the way their eyes moved over me like I was something ugly stuck to the bottom of their shoes. "Hey, Clara," someone would whisper, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Did your mirror break this morning? Or did it just refuse to show you?" Then came the laughter. Always the laughter. It was not even clever most of the time. That was what made it worse. They did not need to be clever. They did not need to work hard to hurt me. I had already done most of the work for them. I already hated my face before they opened their mouths. All they had to do was remind me, so I learned to keep my head down. I learned how to make myself smaller. I learned how to hold my books against my chest and walk close to the wall. I learned how to sit in the back of class, how to eat lunch quickly, how to pretend I was busy on my phone even when nobody was texting me. I learned how to disappear. But there was one place I could never disappear, my own reflection. Every morning, the bathroom mirror waited for me, merciless, honest, cruel. I would stand there under the harsh yellow light and stare at myself until my eyes watered. My skin looked uneven no matter what I did. My eyes seemed dull and tired. My nose looked wrong from every angle. My mouth sat strangely on my face like it did not belong there. Nothing matched, nothing balanced. It was like someone had built me from parts that were never meant to go together. I knew other people had flaws. I knew nobody was perfect. Adults loved saying things like that. But some girls could be imperfect and still beautiful. I was just wrong. Sometimes I leaned so close to the mirror that my breath fogged the glass. I would stare at my own eyes and wonder what it must feel like to wake up and not hate what you saw. What it must feel like to be looked at softly. To walk through a hallway and have people turn because they wanted to see you, not because they wanted to laugh. I wanted to be beautiful so badly that it felt like hunger. That hunger was what led me to the antique shop. I had not meant to go in. That day had been bad, even by my usual standards. Lena and her friends had started on me before first period. Lena was the worst one. She had shiny hair, perfect skin, and a smile teachers mistook for kindness. She used to call me Cave Face because, according to her, my features looked like they had been carved in the dark. At lunch, someone had taken a picture of me eating and posted it in a group chat. I found out because people kept looking over at me and laughing into their hands. I did not need to see the picture. I already knew what it showed. Me. That was enough. After school, I did not want to go home. I did not want to hear my mother ask how my day was because she always sounded hopeful, and I always lied. So I walked. I walked past the bus stop, past the gas station, past the little row of shops I barely noticed anymore. My feet kept moving as if they knew where to go, even though my mind was somewhere else entirely. That was when I saw the sign, Cave Creek Vintage Hideout. It swung gently in the wind above a narrow storefront I had never noticed before. The windows were dusty and crowded with strange old things. Cracked porcelain dolls sat with their glass eyes pointed toward the street. Tarnished mirrors leaned against one another. Old picture frames hung crookedly. There were bottles in different shapes and sizes, filled with liquids that caught the light in colors I did not have names for. Something about the place pulled at me, not invited. Pulled, like a hook behind my ribs. I stood outside for a while, staring through the dirty glass. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I opened the door. A bell chimed above me. The smell hit me first. Old wood, dust, wax, and underneath it all, something faintly sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. "Help you?" The voice came from somewhere behind a shelf. I jumped. An old man stepped into view. He moved slowly, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp. His skin was thin and papery, stretched over his face in loose folds. He looked ancient, but not weak. There was something about him that made me feel like he had been waiting there a very long time. Not for customers, but for someone specific. "I'm just looking," I muttered. He watched me for a moment, then nodded. Most people are. I did not know what that meant, and I did not ask. I moved through the aisles with my arms held close to my sides, afraid of knocking something over. The shelves were packed with strange objects, brass keys with no labels, music boxes that looked like they might play by themselves, photographs of people whose eyes seemed too clear, dried flowers sealed in jars, little metal charms shaped like animals, hands, teeth. I ran my fingers over chipped picture frames and cold trinkets, trying to pretend I knew why I was there. Then I saw the vial. It sat alone on a small velvet cloth inside a glass case that was not locked. The vial was clear and no bigger than my thumb. A faded label was tied around its neck with a thin piece of string. Belladonna. The liquid inside shimmered dark purple, almost black. But when I tilted my head, it caught the light and flashed silver. I reached for it before I could stop myself. The glass was cold. "That's not for you." I spun around. The shopkeeper was suddenly behind me. I had not heard him move. "What is it?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He studied me for a long moment. His gaze lingered on my face, not cruelly exactly, but knowingly. Like he could see every mean word that had ever been thrown at me. Like he could see the shape of my want. "It changes how you're seen," he said. My heart stuttered. "How?" A thin smile stretched across his lips. "That depends on how much you want it." I looked back at the vial. My fingers tightened around it. "Does it make you—" I stopped, embarrassed by the word even before I said it. "Does it make you prettier?" "Prettier," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Yes, it can do that." I swallowed. "But nothing comes without side effects." "What kind of side effects?" He shrugged. "Perception is not a simple thing. Change how others see you, and you may change how you see them. Or yourself." It did scare me a little, but not enough. Because I was thinking of Lena's face when she saw me. I was thinking of the hallway going quiet. I was thinking of the mirror finally becoming something I could stand. "How much?" I asked. The old man watched me for so long that I thought he might refuse to sell it. Then he named a price. It was far less than I expected. That should have scared me too. I paid with shaking hands. When I left the shop, the bell chimed again behind me. I looked back once through the window, but the old man was no longer standing there. Only the dolls watched me go. I did not even hesitate when I got home. My mother was still at work, and the house was quiet. I locked myself in the bathroom and set the vial on the sink. For a moment, I only stared at it. Belladonna. I had heard the word before, in books maybe. Poison, a plant, something old women used in stories. Something dangerous could one drop be. My hands shook as I unscrewed the cap. The liquid smelled faintly floral, almost comforting. Like crushed petals after rain, beneath that sweetness was something bitter, but I ignored it. "Just one drop?" I whispered. I tilted my head back and let one drop fall into each eye. It burned. Not like soap or dust, it burned like something alive had entered me. I gasped and grabbed the sink. Tears streamed down my face. my vision filled with white sparks, then black lines, then colors that folded into one another. It felt like tiny legs were crawling across the surface of my eyes and burrowing behind them. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a choked breath. Then the pain faded. Slowly, I blinked. The bathroom came back into focus. The sink, the towel, the mirror. I lifted my head and saw a stranger. No, not a stranger. Me. But not me. My skin was smooth. My face looked soft and balanced, like every feature had finally found the right place. My eyes were brighter, larger, almost glowing under the bathroom light. My cheekbones had shape. Even my hair seemed shinier, falling around my face instead of hanging there like a punishment. I leaned closer to the mirror. My breath caught, "Is that me?" I stayed there for almost an hour, turning my face from side to side, smiling, not smiling, touching my cheeks as if the beauty might rub off on my fingers. It did not. It stayed. The next day at school, everything changed. I knew the moment I stepped into the hallway. People stared, but not the way they used to. There was no disgust, no cruel smirking, no quick glance and laugh. Their eyes widened, conversations stopped. Heads turned. "Clara," someone said. Another voice whispered, "Wait, is that actually her?" I kept walking, but this time my head was up. Every step felt unreal. The hallway that had always felt like a tunnel of shame became a stage. People moved aside without meaning to. Girls who had ignored me blinked like they were trying to solve a puzzle. Boys who had never looked at me before looked too long. At lunch, I sat alone out of habit. Then Lena's friend Madison slid into the seat across from me. "Hey," she said, smiling too wide. "You look amazing. What did you do?" I could have told her the truth. I could have said I put poison from a strange antique shop into my eyes and woke up beautiful. Instead, I smiled. Nothing. A warm feeling bloomed in my chest. It was not happiness exactly. It was power. I started using the drops every day. At first, only in the morning, then once before school and once before bed, then more. Because the beauty became something I could not risk losing. Every time I looked in the mirror, I feared seeing my old face again. I feared watching the smooth skin roughen, the bright eyes dull, the balance break apart. So I kept feeding it, one drop, then another. Each time I became better, more perfect. People wanted to sit with me, talk to me, walk beside me. Teachers smiled differently. Strangers held doors open longer than they needed to. My mother said I seemed more confident and asked if I had changed my skincare routine. I almost laughed. For a while, I thought I had won. Then I started seeing things. Small things at first. A flicker in the corner of my eye. A shadow attached to someone where no shadow should have been. A face that looked wrong for half a second before snapping back to normal. I told myself it was the lighting. Stress, sleep, anything. Then, during math class, I saw it clearly. Lena sat in front of me. She turned around to ask for a pencil, smiling that fake sweet smile of hers. For 1 second, her face slipped, her skin stretched too tight over her skull. Her smile split wider than it should have, cutting deep toward her ears. Her eyes turned black and empty, not like normal dark eyes, but like holes, hungry holes. I screamed. The whole classroom turned. Lena's face was normal again. Human, pretty, confused. "Clara," the teacher snapped, "what is wrong with you?" Everyone stared. For the first time since the drops, their attention felt dangerous again. I forced a laugh. "Nothing," I said. Sorry. Nothing. But it was not nothing. It kept happening. In the halls, faces twisted when people passed me. Eyes darkened, mouths widened, teeth sharpened. Some people seemed to have too many shadows around them. Some had tongues that moved behind their lips, even when they were not speaking. And they whispered. Not in words I understood. The sounds were wet and low, sliding beneath normal conversation. Sometimes I heard them behind me, even when nobody was there. At night, I stopped sleeping well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their real faces. Not human. Never human. I used more drops. That sounds stupid, I know. But by then, my mind had built its own logic. The drops let me see what everyone else could not. If I was seeing monsters, that meant the world had always been full of monsters. I needed to see clearly. I needed to understand. Instead, everything got worse. People's faces warped constantly now, like masks they could not keep in place. I would be talking to someone and watch their skin ripple. Their eyes would swell, then shrink. Their smiles would hang too low, their teeth would click together when they thought I was not looking. "They're not real," I whispered to myself one night in the bathroom. "They're not human. I can see them now. More than perfect. Beautiful in a way that did not feel natural anymore. But my eyes were wrong. My pupils had grown huge, swallowing most of the color. Thin red veins spread from the corners like spider legs. The skin beneath them looked bruised. I should have stopped. I did not. The beauty was worth it. At least, I thought it was. The day I snapped felt inevitable. Lena was by the lockers with her friends. They were laughing about something. Maybe about me, maybe not. It did not matter anymore. Because then, I saw her. Really saw her. Her face split open like rotten fruit. Her mouth peeled wide, showing rows of teeth that were too long and too sharp. Something moved behind them. A tongue or a worm or something worse. Her eyes locked onto mine, and this time, when she smiled, it was not the way a person smiles. It was the way something smiles when it knows you finally recognize it. "She's possessed," I whispered. The word felt right, obvious. She's one of them. My hands started shaking. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I looked around, waiting for someone else to react. No one did. They just kept talking, laughing, living beside the monster like they could not see what it was. I understood then that I had to do something before it spread. Before it took everyone. The nearest thing to my hand was a metal water bottle sticking out of someone's backpack. I grabbed it. Then I ran at Lena. She barely had time to turn. I swung. The sound was terrible, heavy, wet, final. Lena dropped against the lockers, one hand flying to her face. Blood appeared between her fingers. People screamed. Someone grabbed me from behind. More hands followed. They pulled me back as I kicked and thrashed, still trying to reach her. "I'm helping you," I screamed. "I'm saving you," but all I could see was Lena's face flickering between human and monster. Blood on smooth skin, teeth too long, eyes black, then brown, then black again. The teachers came, then security, then police. Everything became noise. I remember being held in an office while someone asked me questions. I remember my mother crying. I remember a paramedic shining a light into my eyes and frowning. After that, darkness came slowly. At first, it was only blurriness around the edges of my vision. I thought I was crying too hard. Then the shadows thickened. Faces became shapes. Lights became smears. By the time my mother got me home, I could barely see. I stumbled away from her and locked myself in the bathroom. I needed the vial. More drops, more clarity, more beauty. My hands knocked things from the counter as I searched. Toothbrush, soap, a hairbrush. Then my fingers closed around the cold glass. I unscrewed the cap. My mother was knocking on the door. "Clara, please, open the door." I ignored her. I tilted my head back and poured the last drops into my eyes. There was no clarity this time, only pain. It felt like my eyes had caught fire from the inside, like roots were growing through them, pushing into my skull, wrapping around my brain. I screamed until my throat tore raw. I fell to the floor, clawing at my face. My mother screamed too. The door shook. The world turned white. Then red, then black. And then there was nothing. I woke the next morning to sunlight. Soft, warm, normal. For a long time, I lay in bed without moving. My room looked ordinary. Clothes on the chair, books on the desk, posters on the wall, pale morning light across the floor. My eyes did not hurt. I blinked. I could see perfectly. I sat up, heart racing. "What happened?" I whispered. My voice sounded small. Everything felt distant and fuzzy, like a dream I could not quite remember. There had been something bad, something about school, someone screaming, my mother crying. But when I reached for the memory, it slipped away. I got out of bed slowly and walked to the bathroom. The mirror waited. For a moment, fear moved through me, though I did not know why. Then I looked. My reflection stared back, plain, uneven, ugly. The same face I had always hated. I stood there for a long time, staring at myself. My eyes were normal. No red veins, no huge black pupils. My skin was exactly as it had been before. Nothing smooth, nothing perfect, no magic. A tear rolled down my cheek. I frowned. Why am I crying? Somewhere deep inside my mind, something scratched at the surface. A warning, a memory, a name. Belladonna. I turned slowly toward my bedroom. On my desk sat the vial, empty. I did not remember putting it there. I walked toward it, my feet silent on the floor. The little glass bottle caught the sunlight and flashed for a second like an eye-opening. I picked it up. For one moment, I thought I saw something move inside the empty glass. A shadow, small and curled, watching me, waiting. Then the shadow was gone. I set the vial down and tried to laugh, but the sound died in my throat. Outside my bedroom door, my mother called my name. Her voice was careful. Scared? I looked toward the door. For one quick second, the woods seemed to breathe. Then everything became still again. I do not remember what happened yesterday, but when I close my eyes, I hear laughter in the hallway. I hear someone screaming that she is trying to help. I hear glass tapping softly from my desk, and every time I pass a mirror, I feel something behind my reflection staring out at me. Not my face, something wearing my face. Something patient, something that knows I will want to be beautiful again. Story 5. It felt strange to have a wake without any bodies. That was the thought that kept circling in my head as I leaned against the red brick wall of the school, my hands buried deep in the pockets of my jacket. The evening air was cold, and the brick against my back had already stolen most of the warmth from my body, but I didn't move. I just stood there, watching the little memorial flicker in the field. Candles had been arranged in a wide circle on the grass. Some were in glass jars. Some were stuck straight into the dirt. A few had already gone out from the wind, leaving thin trails of smoke rising into the gray sky. In the center was a large display of photographs, flowers, ribbons, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes. Ava and Isabella smiled from every photo, frozen in cheer uniforms, school dance dresses, beach selfies, and birthday pictures. They had been missing for months. No bodies, no real answers. Just posters taped to telephone poles. Rumors whispered in hallways, and parents pretending not to stare too long when girls walked home alone. "Charlie," Cam asked quietly beside me, "do you think they'll ever find them?" He leaned his shoulder into mine like he had done when we were kids and waiting for our parents to stop talking after church. His voice was softer than usual. Cam was the kind of guy who laughed too loudly and joked when things got uncomfortable. But even he didn't know what to say that night. I looked across the field at the memorial. Ava and Isabella had been popular, pretty, loved. The kind of girls everyone knew, even if they had never spoken to them. They floated through school like they were born under better lighting than the rest of us. People said their names differently now, with a little break in the voice, like saying them too normally would be disrespectful. So young Cam's mom had said earlier over and over again to her church friends. So beautiful. Such a shame. That was what adults said when they didn't have anything useful to offer. I didn't answer Cam right away. Across the field between the candles and the crowd of students, I thought I saw Emily. Just for a second, a glimpse of brown hair, a flash of her white jacket, the curve of her cheek lit by candlelight. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Emily Carter, head cheerleader, perfect smile, perfect grades, untouchable. She was standing with a group of girls near the memorial, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Even from that distance, she looked like something made to be admired. Everyone around her seemed dull by comparison. She didn't look at me, she never did. Still, just seeing her was enough to make my chest tighten. I shook my head, forcing myself back to Cam's question. "Sorry, buddy," I said, pushing off the wall. "I gotta go. Practice comes early." Cam frowned. "You're leaving already?" "Yeah, coach has been on my ass." That wasn't true? Not exactly. I just couldn't stand there anymore, surrounded by candles and grief, and Emily Carter standing 10 yards away without even knowing I existed. Cam looked like he wanted to say something else, but he only nodded. "Text me when you get home." "Sure." I didn't text him. I wasn't even supposed to be on that road. The highway had been closed miles back because of construction or flooding or some accident. I don't remember which. There were barricades, warning lights, and orange signs telling drivers to turn around. I should have listened. I should have taken the long way home, like everyone else. Instead, I drove around the barricade and took the narrow dirt detour that cut through the woods. I knew the road, or at least I thought I did. People used it sometimes when they wanted to avoid traffic near the school. It was bumpy, poorly maintained, and dark as hell at night, but it saved time. At first, I was angry. At myself, at Cam, at the memorial, at Ava and Isabella for being missing and making everyone act haunted. At Emily for standing there so beautiful and unreachable. At the world for reminding me, again and again, that some people were born wanted and others were born watching. The deeper I drove into the woods, the quieter everything became. The radio lost signal and dissolved into static, so I turned it off. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, revealing skeletal trees, low fog, and the dirt road twisting ahead. The branches reached over the road like fingers. Wet leaves clung to the windshield. Every now and then, the tires slid slightly in the mud. The silence pressed against my ears. It did not feel empty. It felt alive. Then the engine died. No sputter, no warning, no grinding sound. Just dead. The headlights stayed on for a moment, shining into the fog, then flickered. "Shit," I muttered. I twisted the key. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. I sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for some normal explanation to arrive. Maybe the battery. Maybe the alternator. Maybe water in something I didn't know enough about cars to even pretend I had a plan. Finally, I stepped out. The cold hit me immediately through my thin windbreaker. I zipped it higher and looked around. The air smelled wrong. Damp soil, rotting leaves, and something faintly metallic like old pennies held in a wet hand. That was when I noticed the crossroads. A few yards ahead, 4 paths met in a perfect X. I stared at it, confused. The road had been straight seconds ago. I was sure of it. There had been no intersection, no side paths, no signs. Just one dirt road cutting through the woods. Now there were 4 roads, each disappearing into fog. A lone figure stood in the center of the crossroads. I froze. I whispered, though no one was close enough to hear it. "What's happening?" The figure did not move. It stood perfectly still, black against the fog, shaped like a man but too sharp around the edges. I swallowed. "Hello?" Then the figure turned. "Evening, Charlie?" My stomach dropped. The voice was calm, friendly almost. It had the warm, easy tone of someone greeting an old friend, but I had never heard it before in my life. "How do you know my name?" I called. The man stepped closer, entering the edge of my headlights. He looked ordinary at first. Dark suit, polished shoes, clean white shirt, no tie. He had neat hair and a smile that belonged on a salesman, pastor, or funeral director. But the longer I looked at him, the harder it became to understand his face. It shifted, not in an obvious way. His nose did not stretch, and his eyes did not change color. It was worse than that. His features refused to settle. Every time I tried to focus, something moved just outside my attention. He was handsome, then old, then young, then familiar, then completely strange. "Everyone who ends up here is expected," he said. My mouth went dry. "Expected? If you've got a phone, I just need to call someone." "I have something better," he said. "A solution." I should have backed away then. I knew that, even in the moment. Every story I had ever heard about crossroads, devils, wishes, and deals came rushing into my mind. But along with the fear came something else. A tug in my chest. Not pain, temptation. It pulled at the part of me I hated most. The part that stood outside school walls and watched beautiful people live beautiful lives. The part that wanted so badly it had become ugly. "What do you want?" I asked. The man smiled wider. "Not want," he said. "Offer. You receive your heart's deepest desire. I receive something of equal value." My headlights flickered. My mind raced through every possible wish. Money, fame, power. Ava and Isabella found alive. My car working again. But one thought pushed through everything else. Emily. Emily Carter smiling at me across the field. Emily knowing my name. Emily loving me. The man's eyes brightened as if he had heard the thought before I spoke it. What if... I swallowed hard. What if I wanted someone to love me? The way he looked at me made my skin prickle. Her. My blood went cold. "You can do that. I can do anything." His voice was simple, certain. No bragging, no performance. "But it comes at a price." I stared at him. "What price?" "Your soul." The word should have broken whatever spell he had over me. It didn't. "Not tonight," he said. "Not tomorrow, just eventually." I looked back at my dead car, then down the 4 roads, then toward the darkness where the trees waited. Somewhere far away, a crow or something like one made a harsh sound. I should have walked away. I should have laughed in his face. I should have run until my lungs burst. Instead, I asked, "And she'll really love me?" The man's smile sharpened. "Completely. Mind, body, soul." Something cold moved through the air. Before I could answer, pain pricked my palm. I looked down. I hadn't seen the blade. I hadn't seen him move. But he was holding my hand now, pressing my bleeding palm against a small blackened coin. The metal was warm, almost hot, and the surface was marked with symbols too small to read. "Deal," the man whispered. The next morning, Emily Carter smiled at me. Not a polite smile, not the quick kind you give someone when you accidentally make eye contact. A real smile. At first, I thought I had imagined it. I was standing in my locker, half awake, still trying to convince myself that the crossroads had been a dream caused by stress and fog and maybe hitting my head somehow. Then Emily walked past with 2 other cheerleaders. She stopped, turned, looked directly at me. "Hey, Charlie," she said. I nearly dropped my books. By lunch, she was sitting beside me. By the end of the week, she was mine. That was how fast it happened. One day, I was a background person in her world. The next, she was waiting for me by my locker, touching my arm when she laughed, sending me texts full of hearts, asking if I wanted to come over, telling her friends I was different from other guys. Everyone noticed, especially Cam. Across the lunchroom, he stared at me with a confused look that was almost funny. He pointed at Emily, then at me, then mouthed, "What the hell?" Emily leaned into me immediately. The warmth of her body against mine made every warning in my head go quiet. It felt like a dream. Her laugh, her perfume, her hand in mine. The way she looked at me like I was the only person in the world. I forgot about the crossroads. I forgot about the man in the dark suit. I forgot about the black coin tucked inside my desk drawer. For a while, I was happy. That is the worst part. I was happy. Then the whispers started. At first, they were faint. A voice just behind me, too quiet to understand. It would happen in empty hallways, in the locker room after practice, in my bedroom when the house was asleep. I would turn quickly, but no one would be there. Then reflections began moving wrong. In mirrors, windows, the dark screen of my phone, I would see myself standing still while my reflection leaned forward. Sometimes it smiled when I didn't. Sometimes it lifted a hand when mine stayed at my side. Once in the bathroom mirror at school, my reflection mouthed my name, Charlie. I punched the mirror. The school made my parents pay for it. I told them I slipped. Sleep became almost impossible after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man at the crossroads. He stood in the fog, smiling wider and wider until his teeth stretched too far across his face. Sometimes he held up the black coin. Sometimes he held Emily's hand. Sometimes he wore my face. Emily noticed something was wrong. "You're acting weird," she said one night. She was sitting on my bed with her legs folded beneath her, wearing one of my hoodies. My parents were downstairs watching TV, and the room smelled like her vanilla lotion. She looked perfect there, like she had always belonged in my room. I could barely look at her. "I'm just tired," I muttered. The whisper came again. "She's not real." I flinched. Emily frowned. "What?" "You barely look at me anymore." Because when I did, I kept seeing things. Small things at first. The way her smile sometimes stayed too long after the moment had passed. The way she forgot to blink when she stared at me. The way she said exactly what I wanted to hear, always as if she had been given a script written from my fantasies. "She doesn't love you," the voice whispered. I pressed my palms against my eyes. "She can't." "Stop," I breathed. Emily touched my knee. Charlie? Her fingers were cold. Too cold. I opened my eyes and looked at her. She smiled. Perfect. Rehearsed. Almost mechanical. "Look closer," the whisper said. So I did. For 1 second, her face slipped. That is the only word I have for it. Slipped. Like a mask sliding out of place. Her smile stretched too wide. Her cheeks did not move right. Her eyes stayed open and wet and glassy, but there was nothing behind them. No thought. No Emily. Just something wearing the shape of what I wanted. I jerked backward. "What the hell? What's wrong?" she asked. Her voice had gone flat. "Your face," I whispered. "My face?" She tilted her head. Too slowly. Too far. The whisper roared in my skull. "She's wrong." I clutched my head. "Stop. Stop." Emily reached toward me. "Charlie, you're scaring me." Her hand brushed my arm. Dead cold. Something inside me snapped. I shoved her away. "Don't touch me." She hit the wall hard. For a second, confusion flashed across her face. Real confusion, maybe. Or something pretending very well. "You're scaring me," she said again. "She's lying." "I'm not lying," Emily cried. I froze. She had heard it, or she had answered it. My breathing became ragged. The room seemed to pulse around us, the walls swelling inward and outward like lungs. Emily's face kept shifting. Normal, wrong, normal, wrong. "Make it stop," I whispered. The whisper answered, "You know how." I don't remember all of what happened after that. I remember Emily crying. I remember my hands around something heavy. I remember her saying my name in a voice that sounded almost human. Then I remember blood. So much blood. They found me a few hours later. My parents had heard the noise and called the police when I wouldn't answer the door. By the time they got into my room, I was sitting on the floor, covered in blood, rocking back and forth. Emily lay across the room, unmoving. They told me she wasn't real, I kept muttering. They told me she wasn't real. The police thought it was a breakdown, stress, delusion, maybe grief over Ava and Isabella, even though I had barely known them. They asked me questions, I gave answers that made no sense. I told them about the crossroads, the man, the deal, the coin, the whisper, the way Emily's face had slipped. No one believed me. Why would they? No one noticed the small blackened coin clutched in my bloody hand. Or maybe they did notice and decided not to write it down. The lights flickered as they carried me out. Just before the room went dark, I heard the voice again. Not in my head this time, in the room. Smooth, warm, amused. Pleasure doing business, Charlie. I turned toward the corner. For 1 second, I saw him there, the man from the crossroads, standing beside the window, smiling. And behind him, barely visible, in the glass, stood two girls, Ava and Isabella. Their faces were pale, their eyes were empty, and in their hands they each held a little black coin. Story 6. There she is again, Jessica Mackenzie, the center of my world. The reason I wake up in the morning with my heart already beating too fast, the reason my hands get sweaty in class even when the room is cold, the reason I sometimes forget what I am holding, what I am saying, or even where I am supposed to be walking. I know it sounds dramatic, but I don't care. Some people have dreams about money, sports, fame, or leaving town and becoming somebody important. I only have one dream, and it has had the same face since I was a little kid. Jessica's face. I have known her since preschool. Back then, she wore her hair in little pigtails and carried a pink backpack with cartoon cats on it. I remember that more clearly than I remember most things from my childhood. I remember the first time she shared crayons with me, because I had broken my blue one. I remember the way she laughed when I accidentally spilled glue on my shoes. I remember sitting across from her during snack time and thinking, in whatever simple way a child thinks such things, that she was the prettiest person I had ever seen. Of course, back then, I did not understand love. Not really. Kids say they love candy or cartoons or the big slide at the park. What I felt for Jessica was something bigger than that, though I had no words for it. It was a warm, strange feeling in my chest whenever she looked at me. It followed me through elementary school, through middle school, and now into high school, growing heavier every year. By the time we were teenagers, Jessica had become the kind of girl everyone noticed. She did not even have to try. Some people force attention toward themselves. They laugh too loudly, dress too brightly, or turn every conversation into a performance. Jessica was not like that. She was just naturally magnetic. People gathered around her the way planets circle the sun. She could pull others into her orbit without lifting a finger. She had golden hair that fell over her shoulders like something from a movie. Her eyes were green, sharp, and bright enough to make you feel like she could see exactly what you were trying to hide. When she smiled, people smiled back. When she frowned, everyone noticed. Teachers liked her. Students copied her. Boys stared. Girls followed. She moved through the halls like the whole school belonged to her, not because she was cruel, but because the world seemed to open for her wherever she went. I watched all of it from a distance. That was what I was good at. Watching. I watched her talk with her friends by the lockers. I watched her laugh at lunch. I watched her raise her hand in class and give answers like she had never been afraid of speaking in front of anyone in her life. I watched her tuck her hair behind her ear when she was reading. I watched her roll her eyes when someone said something stupid. I noticed everything. Maybe too much. I knew what kind of gum she liked because I saw her pull the same silver-wrapped pieces from her bag almost every day. I knew she hated the school's tomato soup because she always made the same disgusted face on the days they served it. I knew she wrote with blue pens, not black. I knew she always checked her phone right before second period and smiled at whatever message she got, though I never knew who sent it. For years, I told myself I would talk to her, really talk to her. Not just answer when she asked if she could borrow a pencil, not just say, "Excuse me," when we nearly bumped into each other in the hallway, not just nod like an idiot when we got assigned to the same group project and she said my name like I was any other person. I would confess, I would tell her how I felt. I tried many times, believe me, I tried. But every time I got close, my body betrayed me. My throat closed. My tongue went stiff. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could hear it. I would open my mouth, and nothing useful would come out. Maybe a stutter, maybe one broken word, maybe some pathetic excuse to walk away. Then I would spend the rest of the day hating myself. But today was different. Today I had decided it would end. I could not keep carrying my feelings around like a sickness inside me. They had grown too large, too heavy. Every day I did not speak. They seemed to rot deeper in my chest. I was tired of pretending I was only shy. I was tired of imagining conversations that never happened. So that morning I woke up and told myself, today. I even practiced in the mirror before school. "Jessica, can I talk to you?" "No, too weak." "Jessica, I've liked you for a long time." Too direct. "Jessica, would you maybe want to go out sometime?" Better. I practiced it again and again until the words sounded almost natural. My reflection looked pale and nervous, but I forced myself to keep going. I told myself rejection would not kill me, embarrassment would not kill me, people laughing would hurt, but I could survive it. What I could not survive was silence. At least, that was what I thought then. Now, looking back, I almost want to laugh at how wrong I was. The school day crawled by. First period felt endless. Second period felt worse. At lunch, I spotted Jessica at her usual table with her friends. She was laughing at something one of them said, her head tilted back, her hair shining under the harsh cafeteria lights. I almost stood up then. My legs actually moved under the table. But I stopped. Too many people, too much noise, too much chance of making a fool of myself in front of half the school. I decided to wait until after classes, when people were heading to buses, practices, or clubs. There would still be students around, but not as many. I could catch her near the courtyard where she usually stood with her clique for a few minutes before leaving. All day, my stomach felt strange. At first, I thought it was nerves. That made sense. I had barely eaten breakfast, even though my mother had made toast and eggs. I had only picked at lunch. My whole body felt tight and restless. My hands would not stop moving. I tapped my pencil until the person in front of me turned around and glared. During last period, I barely heard the teacher. The clock seemed louder than her voice. Tick, tick, tick. Each second pushed me closer. When the final bell rang, I stood too fast and nearly dropped my books. My heart was racing. The hallway filled with voices and footsteps. Lockers slammed. Someone shouted at a friend. Teachers stood in doorways watching students spill out like water breaking through a dam. I moved with the crowd toward the courtyard. And there she was, Jessica Mackenzie. She stood near the low brick wall by the flower beds, surrounded by her friends. Her golden hair moved in the afternoon breeze. Her backpack hung from one shoulder. She was smiling, listening to someone talk, completely unaware that my whole life had narrowed down to the space between us. I stopped walking. For a moment, I froze. My body wanted to run. My brain started offering excuses immediately. Not today. Tomorrow. She looks busy. Her friends are there. You'll embarrass yourself. She doesn't even like you. She barely knows you. What are you doing? But something stronger pushed back. No. Today, I wiped my palms on my jeans and stepped forward. My legs felt weak, like they belonged to someone else. Every sound around me seemed too sharp. The scrape of shoes on pavement, the hum of conversation, the squeak of a bus braking near the curb. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed, and the sound sliced through me because I imagined it becoming laughter at me. Still, I kept walking. Jessica was talking to her clique when I reached them. One of her friends noticed me first and gave me a quick look, then looked away as if I was not important enough to hold her attention. Another friend whispered something and smiled. I swallowed. Jessica? God, I hated the way her name came out of my mouth. Small, broken, weak. She turned toward me. For one bright second, the world seemed to slow down. Her hair shifted over her shoulder. Her green eyes met mine. The sunlight caught the side of her face. Then I saw the expression in her eyes. Disinterest, not hatred, not even annoyance at first. Just the blank look a person gives when they are waiting to find out why someone they don't care about is talking to them. What do you want? She asked. The words hit harder than I expected. Behind her, one of her friends raised her eyebrows. I tried to speak. Nothing. My tongue felt too large for my mouth. My throat tightened. My chest squeezed in on itself. Jessica crossed her arms. I took a breath, then another. I had practiced this. I knew the words. They were simple words. Anyone could say them. People said things like this every day, in movies, in hallways, in parking lots, over text messages at parties. It was normal, human, easy. Would you? I began. My voice cracked. I stopped. Jessica tilted her head slightly. Her mouth tightened. Would I what? My face burned. I could feel everyone looking at me now, not just her friends. Other students nearby had noticed something was happening. I felt their attention gathering like heat on my skin. My chest became tighter. I could not breathe properly. I forced air into my lungs and tried again. Jessica, Will, she repeated. She crossed her arms more tightly and tapped one foot against the ground. Crap. She was losing patience. This was not how I had imagined it. In my head, she had looked surprised but kind, maybe confused, maybe even touched. I knew she might reject me, but I had imagined it gently, privately, in a way that still left me with dignity. This was different. This was happening in front of people. I needed to gain control of myself. I needed to get the words out before I completely fell apart. Will you go out? My stomach grumbled, loudly. It was such a strange, ugly sound that I stopped mid-sentence. A couple of people nearby snickered. My face got even hotter. That was weird. I had eaten breakfast. Not much, but enough. My stomach had felt strange all day, but this was different. Deeper. A shifting, bubbling sensation low in my gut. I pressed a hand lightly against my stomach and forced myself to keep going. Will you go out with me? A sharp pain tore through my abdomen. I gasped. It felt like someone had shoved a hooked knife into my stomach and twisted it upward. My knees buckled. My books fell from my hand and slapped against the pavement. Jessica stepped back. What the hell? I tried to straighten, but another burst of pain hit me stronger than the first. I collapsed to my knees. The world tilted. My stomach cramped violently. Something moved inside me. Not gas. Not a normal twist of pain. Movement. A slow, thick squirm beneath the skin. I looked down. At first, there was nothing to see except my shirt shifting with my panicked breathing. Then the fabric near my stomach pushed outward. A sharp point pressed from underneath, stretching the cloth. I screamed. Everyone around me backed away. The point pushed harder. Something beneath my skin dragged itself sideways, then kicked outward. The pain was so intense that my vision flashed white. My hands flew to my stomach, but I was too afraid to touch it. Jessica had both hands over her mouth. Her green eyes were wide now. Not bored, not annoyed. Terrified. Help me, I tried to say. It came out as a wet gag. The students around us began to scatter. Someone yelled for a teacher, someone screamed. A phone clattered onto the ground. I reached toward Jessica, not because I expected her to save me, but because she was the only thing I had been reaching for all day. She backed away from my hand. I fell onto my side, then rolled onto my back as the thing inside me kicked again. My feelings for Jessica vanished. All that remained was horror, pain, Confusion, the thing inside my stomach moved violently now, jerking and sawing like it was trying to cut its way out. I felt every motion, every scrape, every push from the inside. My shirt tore. Blood spread across the fabric. A blunt shape bulged from my abdomen, then withdrew, then slammed forward again. Something sharp broke through the skin. I saw it only for a second, wet and pale and pointed, before the pain forced my head back against the pavement. My body lunged upward against my will. The thing kicked again. A hot spray of blood burst across my shirt, my hands, and the pavement beneath me. Then came a sickening pop. The pressure released. For one terrible moment, I thought I had split open completely. I could hear screaming all around me. But it sounded far away now. My body was cold. My vision blurred at the edges. The sky above the courtyard looked too bright, too empty. Someone ran past me. Someone else shouted, "Get the nurse." Jessica was crying. Or maybe she was screaming. I could not tell anymore. As I slipped in and out of consciousness, I heard a voice from somewhere in the crowd. A teacher, maybe. Or one of the older students. The words were clear enough to cut through everything else. "Oh no," someone said. "It's happened again. Again." That was the last thing I understood before the darkness took me. Not Jessica's face. Not the pain. Not the thing tearing its way out of me. Just that word. Again.